Hello, and welcome to the January 2025 meeting of Triangle Association of Freelancers. Our guest this evening is Nanette Lavoie-Vaughan, who will be talking with us about issues among self-published writers. But before we begin, I wanted to extend a very special welcome to the members of Heart of Carolina Romance Writers for joining us this evening. It's wonderful to have you with us. Nan, it's all yours.
All right, thank you. Well, a little bit of background. Writer's Digest magazine has two contests every year. One for self-published authors that have hard copy books, and one for self-published authors who have ebooks. And it's quite a process. The authors have to submit the physical book, or they have to submit a link to their ebook. That the person who's reviewing their book, they cannot see who that person is. So there's a very special protocol that they have to follow. And then the reviewers have a specific process that they have to follow. So I'm going to start by kind of telling you how I got into this and what the process entails. I was attending the Writer's Digest conference a couple years back where Don was presenting, and we were just meeting the different people who were there. And the person who handles the distribution of the books and selecting the reviewers was at a table, and we just, I happened to mention that I love to read, and she says, "Oh, give me your information, because sometimes I'm looking for another reviewer in case somebody falls out or we don't have enough." Well, lo and behold, we weren't home very long, and I got an email invitation to become a reviewer. So they send you a contract, and you're paid $20 per book. You can tell them how many books you want to read, and you can tell them what genres you want to read if you want to just do a specific genre. If not, they will just send you a potpourri of things. Because they have multiple categories. For any of you who've read Writer's Digest magazine, usually the March issue is when they come out with the list of winners. And you can see that they give overall winners, and then they go by genre. So they have usually the top winner, the runner-up, and then sometimes there's 2 or 3 selections under that get honorable mentions. So for the reviewers, they use a format called Submittable. I don't know if anyone's familiar with that format, but it has the book already loaded in it so that you click on the book if you're doing the review. And then they have set up a drop-down review area for you to rate the book. So there's multiple categories. They want you to look at structure, organization, and pacing. That's the first category. And then, of course, it's got the little tick boxes underneath it from, above average, average, the typical types of things you check off. Spelling, punctuation, and grammar is the second area. Then production, quality, and cover design. Then plot, story, and topic appeal. Then character appeal and development. And then voice and writing style. So the first thing you're doing is checking boxes under each of those categories. Then at the bottom of the drop down, there's a place for you they want you to put in up to 3 comments of things that you liked about the book, and up to 3 comments of things that could have been improved with some constructive criticism and ideally some suggestions as to what they could have done instead. And then those comments have to be placed also in a Word document that's sent separately to the person that they've designated you to send that for. So it's quite a bit of work. And of course, there's very strict deadlines. They have to have all of the reviews done and the Word document submitted by a very specific time. And then after they're all submitted, the reviewers at Writer's Digest go through and read everything. And if there's something that they felt was offensive or could be taken the wrong way, or you misspelled something and missed it in the editing, you will get an email back saying, "Please fix this." So there is some work involved. So that said, I've been doing this for about 3 years now. Because they've been doing a spring one and they've been doing a fall one. Because I think I remember one year I did 2 in 1 year. What'll happen is once you're a reviewer, If they get to the point where they've gotten more books than they already have reviewers assigned to, the reviewers will usually get an email saying, hey, do you know of anyone who you could recommend to be a reviewer for us? So that's a possibility of a way to get in to do this if you're interested. All righty. So that said, I wanted to kind of talk tonight about some of the main categories that consistently come up that I've had to write comments and constructive criticism about. And so first of all, let's just start with the book cover. Some of the common things that I see is that the book cover doesn't really match the theme of the book. If you're writing a mystery thriller, usually that's dark, okay? Don't give me a pastel cover. Don't give me pretty, you know, that's going to throw me off because I'm going to think, oh, this is a cozy mystery. And then I open it up and it's some police procedural or some dark thriller about some crazy killer. And I'm like, oh, well, why didn't they make the book cover to look like that? The other thing too is some people try and be creative and create their own book covers. There's all kinds of platforms now where you can pull pictures and pull images and different things to create a book cover. But some people go beyond that and try to draw their own book covers. And that also can, you know, kind of look amateurish. And you want to, because usually, especially if you're talking about a physical book, the first thing the person's going to see is the book cover. That's what attracts them. Why do I want to pick this up off the bookshelf and then flip it over and see if it's something I'm interested in reading? So you've really got to grab the person right off with your book cover. Even with an ebook, because usually that's all you're going to see when you pull things up on the web. You're going to see the cover and you might get a little blurb underneath it about what the book is about. So it's very important that that book cover looks nice. Also, don't let the font that you're using for your title and your name to overtake the cover. Because sometimes I can't tell what the picture was because the font was so large, or the font was in such a similar color to what the background of the book cover was, I couldn't really even read the title well. And yes, okay. So that was pretty much with the book cover thing on the front. Now, there's some discussion as to whether your biography should be on the back of the book or it should be inside the book. However, you really need to have a biography. And it is amazing the number of books I have seen that the author has not put a bio in. People want to know about you. You know, readers are curious. You don't have to share your whole personal life. And even if you haven't published before, you need to say a little bit of something about yourself so that the reader can connect with you. And promote yourself, you know, put your website on there, put your media sites that you're on so that, you know, they can reach out to you and say, I love this, or, you know, just to say, hey. But it's amazing the number of people that don't put a bio in their book. And then trigger warnings. We got to talk about trigger warnings, folks, unfortunately. The world is changing. There's a lot going on. And we certainly want to write books that are relevant. And we know that a lot of people can be triggered by many different things, not just violence, but certain situations, language, things like that. So if you're writing any content that could fall into a category that could be considered a trigger warning, you really need to have a trigger warning on the book. I've read some very violent mystery thrillers with just, you know, these horrendous people doing terrible things, sexual abuse, physical abuse, and there's been no trigger warning. And it should be in a place where the person sees it. So on the cover, right inside as you open the book, I've had a few people who've added it, but they put it at the end of the book. Well, by the time you've gotten to the end of the book, it's a little too late. So if you need to have a trigger warning there, please make sure that it's somewhere where the person can see it. Okay, now get into the nitty gritty here. Slow pacing seems to be the biggest problem. And I'm also on a couple Facebook pages for people who recommend books to read, and people talk about why I like this and why I didn't like it. And the same thing keeps coming up. The book was so slow starting off that I got to chapter 6 or 7 and nothing was going on. All they were doing was introducing characters or building their world, and I'm bored and I want to put the book down. So how can you move forward from that so that you can start something off with a little bit of excitement or a little bit of mystery, or kind of get to the story a little bit quicker while you're starting to introduce your characters and starting to set your background up a little bit, so that you're not getting into that lengthy description, but instead you're using action and you're using dialogue and you're getting your reader engaged right up front. And really that should be done within the first 5 or so chapters. Also, we have to think about the motivation too. I've read books where I had no idea why the characters were acting the way they were. The action was great, the story was interesting, but I couldn't really understand the motivation for their actions. So that has to be very clear to the reader. And that can be difficult to do sometimes, you know. So how do you portray that? Why is this character acting the way they are? Why have they done these certain things? And that can be shown through how other characters react to them, about some background that you've provided, but it certainly needs to be there, because that's the other thing readers want to do. They want to connect with those characters. And if they don't understand why the character is doing what they're doing, then they're going to say, okay, I'm just going to put this book down. I really don't understand what's going on here. Now, there's all kinds of little things that people use to kind of help bring the story along. And this gets kind of controversial. So I'm going to mention these and you can probably say yay or nay. And at the end, we can have a robust discussion about this. But a trend that I'm seeing lately is that people are using symbols or pictures or quotes or little squiggly lines or distinct lines to show a break in the narrative where they're changing voice or they're changing location or they're changing focus. Personally, as the reader, I find that distracting because it's breaking my vision as I'm going down the page. And if you're writing and you're writing smoothly, so those transitions are obvious with the words that you're using and the way you're presenting your story, then it's not really necessary to put those little things in there. So if you want to play around with symbols and pictures and things like that, I've seen people be creative with maybe using something in the corner of their beginning of their chapter, like a little corner squiggly, or a little, like some person was writing a fantasy novel and the girl had a pet tarantula. So at the beginning of each chapter, they had like a little spider web in the corner next to the chapter number. Okay, that's cute, you know? A lot of fantasy novels now are including pictures or drawings, which is fine because they're separate. They're on a page by themselves. They're not breaking the narrative flow. So usually mention those kinds of things. Some people, especially who are writing historical fiction or who are writing a story that has 2 different timelines where they may be going back to the past and then in the current time, use diary inserts for one of their characters. And this is fine, but also if it's not overused. The biggest mistake I see people doing with this is what they've already told the story about, what they've already mentioned in the story itself, they then repeat by having the diary entry there. So it's not really serving any purpose. The diary entry should take the place of the narrative, or it should illustrate something that they're trying to describe, or to give background to say why they are at this point in the story. And then my favorite of all time is what I call the info dumps. I see this mostly in historical fiction and science fiction and fantasy, because you have built this whole wonderful world for your science fiction and fantasy novel, or you've done all of this phenomenal research for your historical fiction or historical romance, and you want to share all that great information that you've got. But that really bogs down the narrative. This isn't a history book. It's a novel. So you want to make sure that you're using some of those nuggets, but you're using it more as an illustration rather than paragraph after paragraph or page after page explaining a particular trend or a particular historical moment. Or my favorite is with the military fiction. I had an author who literally described every single battleship, every single airplane, every single piece of military equipment in very specific detail, every member of the crew, every job that they had. And it was like, oh, please, just get to it, for heaven's sakes. This is supposed to be a war novel where, we're worried because the Chinese are coming after us in the Pacific, and instead you're talking about airplanes and airplane carriers and submarines and all this other stuff. So, or with the world building in science fiction and fantasy, that should be revealed across time and shown through what your characters are doing. And that's where you can get into, it's okay to put additional information in the back of the book. You might have a list of characters. You might have some fun facts about your world. You might have some information that readers want to know about, especially I'm finding right now, romantasy is the big thing. So we're getting romance and fantasy combined, and they're creating these 4 and 5 series of books. And so, yes, you've got this big world that you're developing. And so you have to start kind of parsing that out and showing it through your characters and showing it through the action. And then you can always include an appendix at the end of the book that gives some more information on the specifics of how you created this or particular things about that area that you need to know. And that comes into the part 2, where we start dealing with books that deal with multiple mythologies or multiple themes or multiple religious beliefs. It can become very, very confusing. So it's nice to build this phenomenal world, but you don't want to overwhelm people with all of these different things that they have to remember. And that's another complaint that I see on the readers group that I'm on, is that it's like, I had to go back 4 or 5 chapters and read this again because I lost the thread, because we were talking about this religious ceremony, and then suddenly we're back over here with this fantasy element, and it gets confusing. So just kind of be very careful with that. Characters, obviously extremely important. That's what readers are looking for, is that a really strong character, someone that they can identify with, or someone that they find interesting because they're a little quirky or a little different, that the relationships seem real, that you don't want someone who's always whining. You don't want someone who's always being snarky, because those have a tendency to turn us off in real life. So why would we want to read about those people? And so a lot of the advice that I give is, don't spend a lot of time telling me this person's backstory. Instead, show me through the tasks that they're doing, through their interaction with the other characters. This is how it develops the character for readers. So they can see through the character's actions, through the way they speak, through their motivation, rather than just, and we have to have villains. Villains are bad. We have to have some people that don't have the best personalities. but we don't have to hit people over the head with it, because it's going to turn them off and they're going to say, you know, I absolutely hate this character. But you want to hate the villain, so you got to make him a good villain, but you got to do it with some restraint. Miscellaneous stuff here. Capitalizing words for emphasis or underlining words for emphasis. There's a lot of back and forth about whether that is really something that we should do. Certainly, you know, if you're using the right word, it's almost implied that that's something that's being emphatic, or the way you're phrasing something. If someone's angry, or someone's extremely happy, or someone's swearing, you know, you don't really have to make it all caps or underline it. The point is, the dialogue is there. They can tell that you can hear that voice in your head when you're reading it. And then we have to be very careful too, and this comes back to the trigger warnings in our current society, to make sure that if we're using words that could be considered racist or insensitive, that we're using it in a historically accurate way, because we know in the past, if we're writing historical fiction, you know, certain words were used that are not acceptable now. And so it needs to be appropriate to the character, to the setting, and so that it's not seen as offensive. Alrighty, let's see here. Oh yes. Let's kind of go back to just basic stuff. Layout. This came up more so in ebooks, obviously. So if you're doing ebooks, I've had to tell, unfortunately, many of the authors, they really need to check that ebook before they send it out, because I have found multiple blank pages in books. I have found where lines have been off, where suddenly there's like 3 spaces instead of 1 between lines, where stuff has been indented way too far in one paragraph. Words have been cut off. And it's not because it was the way the ebook was loaded, it was the way the ebook was produced. So very, very important that you need to check your copy before you're signing off on an ebook, to make sure that everything looks good. Alrighty. Okay, let's see here. Okay. Other nitpicky stuff. A lot of people like to write books about travel, a fictional story about going on a trip, you know, going to the Tuscany wine tours, or being on a cruise, or, you know, being in a vacation setting. They're fun to do. It could be a mystery, it could be a romance. Unfortunately, I've had a couple where instead it just sounded like they were the tour guide. You're not there to tell your readers absolutely everything you saw and describe every single church that you visited on the tour, or every single type of wine that you had. The story is what's happening to the characters as they're on the tour. So yes, you want to have the flavor of where they are. You want to have to share some of the experience of what it is that they're seeing, but you don't want that to overtake the story. Characters who have a favorite phrase. We sometimes will use that to make a quirky character, or to kind of show their personality, but you also want to use that in moderation. I've had several books where this quirky phrase has shown up like every couple of chapters, and it's like, oh, please don't say that again. I'm so tired of that. And sometimes it's just such an oddly made up phrase that you're like, okay, this is even way over the top. I could not even see anybody ever saying this. And sometimes it's just you're trying to be cute, or you're trying to be punny, because that's the way the character is, but it can be very off-putting. And using quotes as fillers. I see this happening too. I don't know why. That they feel that it's important to stick a quote in from another book, or a quote from a piece of poetry, or a quote from a song. Now, if it's germane to what's going on at the time between the characters and they're referencing it, great. But if you're just going along through the narrative and they think that this quote is going to help to illustrate that part of the story, it's very disruptive to the narrative flow. So, and that brings me back to the beginning of chapters again. Besides people putting pictures or little things in the corner of the starts of chapters, I'm also starting to see a trend where people are putting quotes at the beginning of chapters. Once again, there shouldn't be a quote at the beginning of every single chapter. It's not necessary. If there's a particular theme to one chapter that's relevant to, fine, but let's not do that for every single chapter. And then it's okay if people are putting, like, if you're using multiple characters and you've got the name of the person at the beginning of the chapter, that helps your reader. Or if you're going back and forth in two timelines to past and present, having the date at your chapter heading is okay. But then I also see where people now are writing a whole sentence that describes what's going to come up in the chapter. Well, then why would I want to read the chapter if I've already read the synopsis in one sentence? That doesn't make any sense to me. So please don't do that either. Sometimes I see vocabulary that's above the reading level, especially if I'm reading sometimes, because I have been given middle grade books and YA books because they have been said that they could also be read by adults. So they have come in the package of books that I've gotten. And I've had a couple that were marked as middle grade, but the vocabulary was very, not necessarily adult words, but words that a middle grade level student would not understand, because middle grade is considered 8 to 10 years of age. And this would be more applicable for a teenager, a YA novel. So just being very careful with that. If you are going to use those references and appendices that I talked about, if you've got a lot of material that you want to share, and this is where the guy should have put all of his military stuff about the planes and the ships and everything, so he could describe the engines and the boat propellers and stuff. And you don't need to reference it within the narrative of the story, because I've seen that happen too, where people have been nice that they have put those materials at the end of the book, but then as you're reading it, all of a sudden in the middle of a paragraph, there's a little ellipse, and inside it's like, see appendix number 2. I don't need to know that. And it breaks my reading narrative again. I'm like, okay, what? Do I want to flip back there now and then have to come back? No, okay. I know it's all there because I've picked up the book and I've looked through it. So if I feel I need to go and look at appendix number 2 right now, I'll do that. But you don't need to tell me that. And then, where was I here? I had one that I was going to do a yay or nay on. Pardon me, I've got so much stuff here.
Can I mention, Nan?
Yeah.
That being one of the judges that I've been for the last 4 years.
Yes,
I
Nancy.
think I write better now because I see the pitfalls.
Mm-hmm.
So it has been a big help.
Definitely. I think, yeah. And now I find I'm writing my memoir and I have an idea for a novel. And so, yeah, you're right. It's definitely helped my own thoughts as a writer, and made me just more aware, and also too, being in the readers group that I'm in on Facebook now, being able to chime in and say to people, oh yeah, I agree that this should have been done this way, or yeah, this is a good book except for this. And it really does help you to kind of critically think, about your own writing. And we try and be as nice as we can. and sometimes it's very hard. And I know sometimes a lot of these are beginning writers. This may be their first novel, and they have to pay for this. It's not cheap. They have to pay to be in this competition. And they're going to be getting feedback. And so, you have to be kind and kind of sometimes, unfortunately, if I've had a book that really I'm struggling, to find something to say to somebody, because they're really going to have to do a lot of editing to make this a better book, or on their next adventure, since this one's already been published, is, you can always say, well, you can pick a character and say, that I really liked this character because I could relate to the way that you described them and what they were going through. And then unfortunately, sometimes I just have to say, this book will appeal to readers of ba whatever the genre is. And that makes it difficult. I feel bad when I have to do that, because I've had to struggle, to say something positive. And I think that is because I'm hoping that those are the writers who have not had beta readers, or have used beta readers that are not necessarily the right choice for them. Your best friends are not always your best beta readers, because they're going to prime, be nice to you. So you need beta readers that are going to be honest with you, so that you are putting the best product out there. And then sometimes I feel that people just feel, well, I don't even need a beta reader. I've done this great job. I've got this book. I need to get it out there. And they get it out there before it's really polished and ready to go. But I'd say, having done this now a couple of years, that has really been the minority of books that I've had to look at. Fortunately, most of these are really good. I can always pretty much get the grouping that I need to get to send to them to move forward. And other people that I knew had a good book and were really getting towards being a great book, and hopefully the advice that they've been given is going to help them to make the next one better, or if they choose to go back and edit the book that they had already submitted. So as far as the nuts and bolts, again, if you're going to do the physical books, you can ask for how many you want. I usually take 50. I'm a very fast reader. I'm a fast reader, so I can read a book in a day
They come in
with
25.
full comprehension.
Man, remember, they come in 25 groupings.
Yeah, they come in
25
groups of
books.
25. Yeah, so 25 is the lowest you can go. And you can, if you want to start with 25, and then if you can do 25 and you want to do 25 more before the deadline, you can always ask for more, because they're always looking for more people to do books. So I usually start out with 50. And then they've come back to me and said, hey, we got a few extra books. If you want to pick a particular genre or two genres, you can. I initially was saying, send me whatever, because I love to read. Now I'm kind of getting tired of mystery thrillers. So if I'm asked to do the next go round this year, I'm going to focus more on historical fiction and science fiction and fantasy, because those are the things I like to read. With the ebooks, did you do ebooks, Nancy?
Yeah.
I had some issues with the ebooks this last time. A lot of times the links were not working.
I had that, the first one I tried, and I said, oh, I'm an idiot. What happened? It wasn't me.
Yeah,
So,
it wasn't me either.
some come from Amazon. Those are easy,
Yeah.
usually.
Yeah, it's interesting because
Yeah.
people use different platforms. And so I had to, Amazon with Kindle, it was easy. But some of the others, I had to get a specific e-reader on my computer. And even with that, there was a couple that wouldn't open.
Yeah.
But Nikki has been great, working with me, and has sent me, links of different things I can try. The other thing that's come up is that the author is not supposed to know who their reviewer is. These are blind reviews. And this year, for the very first time, I had a woman, instead of sending it the way that it's supposed to be sent, she sent a link that was asking for a review copy of the book. And in order for me to see the book, I had to put in my name and my email address.
Yeah, that's,
Uh-uh.
I had that
So,
too.
did you?
Yeah, yeah. And I
Yep.
had one person's link that went to their Google page.
Oh,
of,
jeez.
like their Gmail. I
Yeah.
said, well, that's not gonna help me.
Nope.
So,
So that person was disqualified. When I reached out to Nikki, she said, "Oh, no, they can't do that. Don't worry about that book. You know, we'll still pay you, but we're gonna notify this author that this was not allowed and her book has been disqualified."
I had one that was copyright 2013.
Wow.
I asked about it because they will take like 2018, 19, 20, 20.
Yeah.
They take older books.
Yeah,
So yeah, no, that was disqualified.
I
So
would
just
think
want to let
so.
people
Jeez.
know that sometimes the books are this big
Yes.
and sometimes they're this big.
Yes, they're
So what
tiny.
I throw in my purse to take
Yep.
and read somewhere.
Yes.
So
Then
it's
once
not-
we're done
yeah.
with the physical books, they give us a deadline that we cannot do what we want to do with them until after that deadline. Because they don't want them getting out there, like if we're donating them or giving them to the Goodwill or whatever, so people could trace back to us in any way that we were the reviewers. So this year, you know, we're long finished. Everything has been turned in for a while. I had a few typos I had to fix this week because they're down to deadline because stuff's going to be published in the March issue of Who Won. So our we have a date in February where we can release our books and put them out into the world if we're not keeping any of them. And of course, the ebooks we don't have to worry about because we just read them and, you know, they stay out there online. Nancy, did you have anything you wanted to add to this? Because I know you've been doing this a couple years longer than I have.
I'd like to also ask the same of Allison after Nancy.
Yes,
talked.
Allison's been doing it too.
Well, she's young. I'm retired. And I look forward when those boxes came. This year, I got the box of nonfiction, and I've had fun with those.
Ooh.
I'm reading stuff, psychoanalyzing myself. I had one on hair. I was shampooing my hair wrong. But I mean, I look forward to it. And I have my chair, my little bucket with my phone, and my little flags. I use flags. You see the flag? Because that's how I do good and bad. And I write a little note, so when I go to write my little narrative, I know what happened. And my carrot, and I go out front of the house where it's quiet and behind a tree, and the bunnies come out, and I just read until about 11 o'clock, because then the sun's too overhead. And I had cancer removed here. I'm not like anymore. But I mean, I look forward to it, and I can do 3 books pretty quickly. Then I'll go do the document.
Mhm.
Yeah, I keep a document on the computer because they want that info.
Yeah, they do.
What the book I picked was the overall winner, so it was a really
Yes.
good story.
I had one too. The last year, one of my fiction books was the overall winner. Yeah. Yeah,
So that's kind of nice to know. So,
it is. Yeah.
Allison, do you have anything? I'm sorry, Nancy, I didn't mean to interrupt.
okay, no, I just want to say that I enjoy it, and it was not a lot of money for the time spent. Okay, reading a book and then writing something, but I made a good chunk of money. It's got
Yeah.
my 1099.
You earned it though.
You do. We
Yeah.
do.
It helps.
Allison, do you have any observations from your work as a reviewer?
Yes, I do. I've been doing this since 2000, and I've done it at least 4 times. I think 4 or 5 times, both the physical books and the ebooks. This last time was like, it almost drove me crazy. I swear to God. But I do have a really funny thing, because the first time I did it, so it's very exciting when the box comes in, right? and it's usually
Mhm.
about $3 if you get 50 books, right? And I remember, and we were homeschooling my daughter at the time because it was 2020, might as well. And, well, actually, no, they were home anyway. So anyway, so the boxes came in, and she was going, "What's in the boxes?" So we had a, great reveal of the boxes, and there were all these books there, and I just sat there with this really big pile of books, and of course, the science fiction and the fantasy ones were about this big,
Yeah.
this thick,
Yeah.
which is what I'm going to talk about in a minute. But anyway, so I was always like surrounded by piles of books, which I am anyway, but usually not that stacked high, right? Not 50, right? And I had my little corner and with 50 books. And then my daughter Sarah came back from the library one day, and she said, "I got to read all these books in 2-3 weeks." Because she'd heard me so many times saying, "Oh my God, I've only got 3 weeks left, and still got 30 books to read and review." And of course, I always leave it till last minute to review. I always have really good intentions, but then, I do all the reviews in 2 days, right?
Oh,
Sometimes one day. I did 50 in one day once. Oh my God, it was
no.
crazy. Yeah, that's how I work. I have to have a deadline to make.
Like
But
I
anyway, so
said, I'm retired, so I can do
Yeah.
Andrea
Yeah.
wanted to know if you know a book is definitely not going to move forward, that is not going to be a winner. Do you still have to finish it? I believe the
Yes, you
answer to
read
that
all of
is
Yes.
them.
so.
You
You have
read
to
In
all
read
order
of
the
to
them.
give an
whole book.
accurate
Yes.
critique.
Yeah. But
Yes.
what I was going to say, that the worst ones in my experience to read are the science fiction and the fantasy, because they're usually very, 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 very long.
Yes.
And they're usually full of too many characters. This is my observation. They're too long, too many characters, too much fighting. Oh my God! In some of these fantasy worlds, all they do is fight, and the body count is like hundreds in some of these books. It's like oh my God, I'm overwhelmed with all the violence, right? And then too many complicated names of either characters or place names, or one guy even made stuff up to call things, like he had his own little language in this world that he created, right? He was a great writer, but it was so confusing that it was like, okay, who's this person again? And another thing that I that you brought up, Nan, was I had one novel with illustrations in it, and the characters were fawns, and one of my like Mr. Terminus in C.S. Lewis, right? So that all the characters were fawns, right? And I was going,
Oh,
did you put this in the wrong category? Because this is adult fiction, so I'm not quite sure. And it had pictures in it, right? So it had illustrations in, like, lots of them, pictures of fawns fighting.
oh, I had one author who made hers a
Yeah.
coloring book. So between chapters, there were coloring book pages of her different characters, her different mythical characters.
And then I had someone else that had little cartoon pictures of, so it was actually quite nice book, but it was from two characters' viewpoint, right? And then when you got, like, let's just for the sake of argument say Billy and Ted, right? So when Billy came up, was a little cartoon drawing of Billy right above his neck, right? And
Oh.
then, and one of my critiques was basically we would like to draw that picture in our mind of the character. We don't need you to illustrate that. So
Every time he came up?
literally, oh yeah,
Oh.
every time. And
Wow.
like you said, there was another one with quotes. With every new chapter there was a quote, and to me that, like you said, that's distracting from the story. I just need to know, is it chapter 2 or 3, whatever, right?
Right. Yeah.
Tim, that's my opinion. And then what else?
I usually try to read the largest books first.
Oh God,
I
you
put
see,
them on my shelf.
I don't do that. I leave
The
them till
largest
last.
ones, and then if I'm going in the car to a doctor appointment, I take the
A little bit
one.
way.
Oh my God. Oh, and another thing, right? If you're going to use the Welsh language, make sure that
Oh.
it's correct, because I can speak Welsh. It's my
Yeah.
first language. So actually, you know what? Somebody somebody called the world Cymru, which is the Welsh word for Wales, right? And I'm going, you do know that's the Welsh word for Wales, right? It's an actual country. But anyway, you know, I was actually very impressed with a couple of people who did use Welsh words. They were actually very accurate and they used it well. And so I had to comment on that, you know. So if you do
Yeah.
use a foreign language, make sure you know what you're doing.
Somebody on the breeders group just said that that happened with a Romanian novel.
Oh,
And she's Romanian.
interesting.
And
Yeah.
the words that he used were completely incorrect.
Hmm.
None of them would have made any sense if you knew the real Romanian word, and the names of the characters were not real names. They were
Yeah.
objects. So yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Does anyone have any additional questions for either Nan or any of the other readers, or any just general comments about this? Sarah, let's start with you. You're muted. Oh, there we go.
With Nan, you said, I mean, so when you've read before, sometimes one of your books that you've reviewed ends up being a winner.
Yes.
When that happens, was it always clear to you that this one probably would be? Are you ever surprised, or you're like, oh, of course, I am not surprised?
No, not really, because usually what we're told is we have to, once we get through all of our books, we have to submit one that we think they tell us that they want a top pick, an alternate top pick, and then 3 or 4 honorable mentions from each batch. So we're submitting those to them, and then the rest we're marking as not move forward, because then they go to a second round where everything that's come in that's been marked as those, then they separate them into the categories, because this time I got asked to take a look at 6 books in, I think, a mystery thriller category that had been moved forward, and I was asked to rank them 1 through 6. So it'll be interesting to see if the ones I ranked 1 and 2 are going to come out in March as being, you know, one of the top winners.
Is that something you look forward to? Like finding out if the ones that you thought were the best also get chosen by the next people?
Yeah, definitely. Because it was interesting too, because this year, 2 that I had done the first year as physical books came back to me as ebooks this year.
Oh, okay.
And I contacted them and said, I've already read these books, you know, and one of them was actually one I had moved forward as the physical book. So what they chose to do was they gave those 2 books to another reviewer, and they sent me 2 additional ebooks, because I didn't feel it was fair that I had already read the physical book.
I got the same one back.
Was different. So this person didn't win, I guess, or they didn't think they were going to win, so they put it in the ebook competition.
Yeah, sometimes I'll do that.
Competition.
I got the exact same thing twice, and I told her, say, I've had this book before, and you know what she told me? Everyone has. So it's like,
oh gosh, I guess that person just keeps submitting again and again.
And it wasn't a bad book. It was very nice. It was a very entertaining romance, you know. And I you know what my advice to be to anyone who wants to do this is, like, romance is the easiest to read and the easiest to review.
Yes,
I think that's my opinion.
Yes.
Don't take science fiction. Don't do it.
Paul wants to know if you receive a book that's like the second in a series or something, if you have to read the first one.
I got 3 of those.
Yes.
I had 3.
And
that
that
the same batch
reminds
of books.
Yeah, that reminds me too about series. That's my other bugaboo. If if I know this book is going to be a series, each book has to stand alone, even though you're doing a series. Do not leave me on a cliffhanger that I have to then wait for book 2 to finish the story, because book 2 may never happen.
Right.
And I don't know how many times I have had to write that. You know, this is one book. It stands alone. Yes, it's a series. You're going to use the same world and the same characters, but their story needs to finish before you get to the second book.
Any other questions?
I have a question. This is Tara. Hi.
Sure.
This has been really good information. Quick question. What is the first deadline when you get your set of books for the first time? What is the deadline to have them read and scored? Is it
How
like
much
3
time
months?
do we usually
How,
have?
3
how long do you
months.
have, Nan? How
Yeah.
long do they give you?
Like 3 weeks, 3 months?
Oh,
3 months, isn't it?
3
Is it
months.
3 months?
3 months?
Yeah.
Okay.
about 3 months, yeah.
I think it was August, mid-August.
Yeah, and you
This
got
year.
them in May or April, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, we
early
got
May.
them, we
Early
got
the
them in
physical
late
ones.
April or early May, and they were
Yeah.
due in August. And then I think the fall ones came out in, there were fall ones, right? One
The
year?
And that was
the
the
second
ebook one.
finalist.
The
The
ebook.
yeah,
The
the
finalists.
ebooks are in the fall.
Yeah.
So those came out in what, like September?
I got mine really late. I had like a month and a half to do mine. And
It's
they only
September or
gave-
October, and we had till like around Christmas, so.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
before Christmas.
I read 75.
No,
kids'
wait,
books.
after.
I did it, so, but again,
Okay.
I'm retired.
Yeah. So you
Alright.
you definitely have to stay on task. You know, Nancy and I are retired, so
I didn't
you know,
stay on
we
task.
can read away. But you know,
Yeah.
if you're working, then you really need to consider, if you want to try this, maybe just start with the 25. Because, you know, trying to do 50, you know, and everybody does it different. I keep a notebook and I write notes as I'm reading.
Me too. There
And
is.
then I go back and I use those notes to then I write my Word document first,
Mm-hmm.
so I can write my comments, because I know the other is just checking boxes. Yes, this was satisfactory, it was above satisfactory, whatever. And then
Cut and paste.
just me at the bottom of the page where I have the notes in my notebook about the book, I will actually start to write my comments so that I know what, and then I'll just transcribe it into my Word document, and then I can cut and paste it into submittable.
Okay.
It's a
Good deal.
process. It's a
It
long
is.
process.
Yeah.
I've
And
watched your
everybody does
videos.
it a little differently.
Yeah.
Susan?
Don't do it like I do. Seriously.
I have a couple of questions for those who have judged, and to think about. Do you get? Does the contest award different genres, or?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so
Yes.
all right. And then the second thing is, but they're shuffled for the judges. You get to
Sometimes.
It
make.
can be. It's all up to you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, you can say, all I want is science fiction and fantasy.
No,
Or
don't
you can
do it.
say,
Don't do it.
send me, you know, send me a whole bunch of different stuff.
Okay.
Or I'll read everything but this.
Yeah.
They
know,
used
'cause
to do
I-
it. They used to do a genre. Because I
They
used
used
to get,
to.
yeah, and now I think they've broken it down a little bit. Because the last time I
little
got
more.
the dregs, because I
Me
came in
too.
late.
Oh,
No,
did you ask
no,
for that? Dregs. I'll have the dregs.
No, I
Signed,
got
Allison.
the dregs. I said, please, no science fiction. And they
Yeah.
gave me half, say 10,
Oh.
12.
Oh,
10
yeah,
science
this year
fiction.
yes, because they had reached out to me and said, you know, we've
Nobody
got
wants
so much science fiction and fantasy left over, we don't have reviewers for. And I'm like, I'm
gave 'em
still
to me.
plowing
They
through
gave
mine.
'em
I can't take any more, but I'll see if there's anybody else. The first year
took
they
some
came
more.
back to me and they actually sent me a couple of books of poetry.
That's what I got too. There must have been some.
Some glitch, I don't know, because I finished
know.
everything. Think, oh, good, I'm done. I can get back to my own reading stack, which of course is always ridiculous and now is even bigger because I've been thrift shopping.
I heard about your thrift shopping.
Yes. And
did
so she's
poetry
like,
and
well, can you
memoir.
do poetry? And I'm like, okay, I guess I could do poetry, sure.
No.
Yeah, I did poetry and memoir.
And then just
Yeah.
to finish off, I just want to comment that I feel that that you may find romance an easier kind of book to judge because it's the opposite of a lot of fantasy. That is to say, limited number of characters,
Yes.
Sorry.
tending therefore to be shorter,
Yes.
not always, but
Yes.
but certainly nothing like those books that where even the title is long.
Yeah.
Hundred
Rare
pages.
and Bleeding
Yes.
Kingdom,
Yes.
that
Yeah.
kind of thing.
I got like there was one book, there was a 15-page glossary at the back with all
Yes.
the terms that he had made up.
Yes.
It's like, oh my God, stop, please. Stop.
Okay,
I've
but
seen that at the beginning of a book.
Yeah.
That too.
Oh.
You've
with
got
the
15
character
pages
list
at the beginning.
and a map. There's a map of all the, the places that you can't pronounce.
And how many,
Yeah.
how many
I
of
had
you
one of
were in
those.
line this week to pick up your copy of Onyx Storm?
I got a copy because I went to the Rebecca Yarros event. I actually heard her speak. She's really very interesting. She has a fascinating background.
That has been all over the readers group on Facebook this week. Everybody went, Onyx Storm, oh my God.
Onyx? What is it?
Onyx Storm,
Onyx
it's book
Storm.
4, is it?
Book 3. Book 3.
Book 3 of the Fourth Wing series.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
Mhm.
by Rebecca
Yes.
Yarros. Yes.
All right, I'm gonna pull this meeting back on the sidewalk. But this has been, before we move on though, is there anything else, Nan, that you need to talk about or anything else, any other tips?
No, I don't think so.
This-
So, I guess if you're interested in being a reviewer, you can shoot one of us an email, and that way if we get one of our emails from the people that we work with saying, hey, we need some extras, then we can go ahead and refer you.
Also want to reiterate that if any of you have article ideas for Writer's Digest, something on craft or something about publishing or whatever, that Amy Jones is pretty much reviewing pitches throughout the year. There's a special portal for that on their website for submitting article ideas. It's not just an email to Amy anymore. So, but it's an easy portal to work with. So I just wanted to throw that out there for those of the Carolina romance writers. Many of you are very well published writers. There's some issues on here that you think that you could write about authoritatively. I would definitely encourage you to pitch. This being our first meeting of the new year, I wanted to go ahead and establish that the board of directors remains the same. They are Maya Spikes is our president. Mark Cantrell is our vice president. Marvis Henderson is our secretary. It's different titles on the website, but this is essentially the positions. I'm the treasurer. Hannah Weisenberg is the membership director, and Christy Stevenson is the publicity director. And that's our 6-member board of directors. As I mentioned earlier, before the meeting started, our 2025 conference will be held on Saturday, May 17 at the McKimmon Center at NC State in Raleigh. It's a wonderful venue for a conference if you've never been there before. We've been holding our conferences there for the last several years, and it's worked out very, very well. We will be opening registration shortly, and I'll be making major announcements about that when the time comes with a lot of reminders. And so hopefully all of you will be able to join us. If you are a TAF member, and meaning you are registered, you're a formal TAF member, the rate for the conference is $60, which is a bargain, a huge bargain. And as I mentioned earlier, the standard rate is $109 early bird and $119 after that and at the door. Our keynotes are S.A. Cosby, who I mentioned earlier, is our fiction guest keynote, and Tiffany Yates Martin is our nonfiction guest. And several TAF members this year will also be presenting various sessions.